Hi, Peg Leg Page here, the 1-foot gamer. They call me that because I've only got one leg. The second one doesn't go all the way down, stops before the knee. But today, we're going to look at a favorite race in D&D, Dwarves. We're going to start all the way back in the early 70s with that OD&D white box set, and we'll take it up to 3.5 because I stopped being an expert at D&D after 3.5. So we're going to look at what the advantages, disadvantages, the major changes the Dwarven race goes through, and why we can't call them diggers anymore. So, your Dwarves, they were in the very first release of Dungeons & Dragons. And in the early releases, they often seem to be drawn much shorter than they were later, but that's just an aside. I'm actually going to read right out of the white box here. Dwarves may opt only for the fighting class, and they may never progress beyond the 6th level, Myrmidon. Their advantages are, 1, they have high level of magic resistance, and they thus add 4 levels when rolling savings throws. So a 6th level dwarf equals a 10th level human for savings throws. Number 2, they're the only characters able to fully employ the +3 magic Warhammer, which is explained in Volume 2. Third, they note slanting passages, traps, shifting walls, and new constructions in underground settings. And number 4, they're able to speak the languages of gnomes, kobolds, and goblins, in addition to the usual tongues. See languages in this volume. I would also going to note that the Dwarven entry in the monster section of the white box shows that dwarves encountered as monsters take half damage from large, clumsy monsters such as ogres. Although PC dwarves don't seem to share this ability because there's nothing in the PC section about this. So, looking at it, dwarves were originally strictly better than human fighters until the game got up to 7th level, at which point they started being worse as the bonus saves and the ability to use some weapon that was probably never going to show up isn't going to make up for the fact that they stopped gaining levels. The weapon in question is actually a +3 throwing returning warhammer. It sounds cool, but once you end up in melee range, which you will eventually, the throwing and returning part stops mattering. It matters, for one attack probably. The Min and Magic book, which is the first book in the white box, didn't have anything to say about the height, weight of the dwarves or anything about their culture or society, so you just got to make it all up from Tolkien or whatever sources you wanted to. So we're going to move on and look at Holmes Basic. I didn't look at Holmes Basic in my elf video, but decided to look at it here. And Holmes Basic gave dwarves a little more detail. According to Holmes Basic, dwarves are about 4 feet tall, stocky of build, they weigh 150 pounds, very broad shoulders, skin a ruddy tan, brown, or gray. They wear long beards, they are sturdy fighters and especially resistant to magic as shown by their better saving throw against magical attacks. They have infravision and can see 60 feet in the dark, and they do keep that bit about that +3 throwing and returning warhammer. So finally we get a little bit of a description of a dwarf. Now I've noticed one thing, the game has always seemed to describe dwarves as having brown, gray, or tan skin, but the artists tend to normally depict dwarves as having a very Caucasian look to them, not having gray skin or brown skin. Occasionally you will see a brown skinned dwarf, and usually they will tend to have African features in that case. So this is a case of the art not matching up to what the game says. The Rules Cyclopedia D&D expand a little bit further, keeping the 150-pound weight and the 4-foot average height. They added the fact that they're fond of food and drink, so before that we weren't sure about that. They kept their infravision and the rarely used stonework detection abilities. The thing about those stonework detection abilities is I've never seen that used by 98% of players who played dwarves. Now the ones who do use it, they use it all the time, but the rest of them don't use it at all. I would say overall Holmes Basic and Rules Cyclopedia dwarves are strictly better fighters until they hit their level cap. Because they fight the same, they have incredible saving throws, much better than the fighter chart does. But eventually, as you get further past the level cap, the fighter's ever-growing hit points and ever-improving saves, because the fighter's saves are going to keep getting better too, make it superior to the dwarf overall. Now we'll go to what is one of the best dwarves in the game, the AD&D dwarf. AD&D puts a 9th level cap on dwarves. That seems awful. Oh my goodness, they can't go over 9th level, but I don't think I've ever played AD&D over 9th level, so I'm not sure this matters. And they've got some choices now. They can be fighters, thieves, or fighter thieves. And if you really plan for the campaign to go on for a long time, there's a good argument to just go ahead and go the fighter thief route. I know for other races I've suggested that's a bad idea, but it seems to be a good choice for the dwarf. That dwarf's only going to lag one level behind, splitting that XP, and having the full complements of thief skills could help that dwarf maintain viability as a character as their human companions keep gaining levels later. Also, dwarves make excellent. Surprisingly enough, dwarves are one of the best races to scout ahead, both because they can see in the dark, they've got the various abilities to detect stonework problems and ramping corridors and such. And when you add the thief skills onto that, they're suddenly the best scout ahead in the dungeon character in the game. Dwarves now have a huge bonus to most savings throws based on their constitution. It'll go up to like +5. Unless, I think it can go higher if they have somehow an impossible constitution. This version of the game is probably the height of the era of dwarves as diggers, as the rules specifically state that they're miners of great skill. And dwarves now suddenly have a +1 to hit goblins, hobgoblins, and orcs, while ogres, trolls, and giants have a -4 on their attack rolls against the dwarf. It's rather a Gygaxian thing to give the opponents a penalty rather than give the dwarf an armor class bonus against them. That would seem to make more sense, but that's not the way Gary Gygax like to do things. Dwarves now gain a +1 bonus to Constitution and a racial-specific -1 to Charisma with a 16 racial maximum on Charisma. But the penalty and the maximum only apply to their dealings with non-dwarves. So you can still have it. You can have a dwarf who has a 18 charisma to other dwarves, and he'll just have a 16 to everyone else. The Dungeon Master's Guide has charts that indicate that Dwarven Clerics exists, but there's no option given to play them as PCs. And the Dwarven Clerics strangely begin play in the old age category, which will have already gutted their physical statistics. And also hidden in this chart are some age-related ability score adjustments that should be affecting almost all characters, particularly human ones, that I've never seen mentioned any. Apparently there's a young and a mature category for all races, and the overwhelming majority of characters basically should have a +1 to strength and con due to being in the mature age class. I've never noticed this before. I've never seen anyone mention this. This could mean a 20 con dwarf. This could mean 19 strength humans, but never seen it mentioned. Dwarves can apparently begin play as young as 45 years old and should live to be at least 450, if not killed by goblins first. They range from 42 to 54 inches tall and can weigh between 104 and 174 pounds. Now dwarves are strictly better fighters than humans until they hit their level cap. They're also strictly better thieves than human thieves until they hit that same cap. Not just because of the combat bonuses, but because the stonework detection abilities synergize with thief abilities. And they get a 10% racial bonus to open locks and a 15% racial bonus to find and remove traps, two of the most thiefy thief skills around. They do suffer a racial penalty to climb walls and read languages. However, read languages is never that important, and I don't suggest that your thief should ever be climbing walls. Not of any real height, unless it's a dire emergency, because if you climb enough tall walls as a thief, you will eventually fall off and die, regardless of what your percentage is. Alright, let's move on to AD&D 2nd Edition. In 2nd Edition, dwarves have officially gained their grumpiness. Before that, dwarves are apparently not grumpy. They also gain a love of gems and a dislike for elves. And they're finally allowed to officially be clerics, and they don't have to be old men to be them. They're going to retain that huge savings throw bonus from 1st edition, as well as all their combat advantages. But then, towards the end of the dwarf section, they wreck the entire race. They give them an unacceptable 20% chance failure rate with almost all magic items except for weapons, shield, armors, gauntlets, and girdles. And they retain the same general starting age, height, and weight. Dwarves still suffer level limits in 2nd edition, although all of them have been raised. The real issue with the class in 2nd edition is the 20% failure rate with magic items that basically ruins dwarves at mid to high levels. Every other character in the game is going to have magic items they're going to be able to use to do assorted things, And in the hand of the Dwarves, these items will always be unreliable. Without that penalty, Dwarves are strictly better than humans in all classes that they can pursue, right up until they hit their level limits. Alright, let's move on to our 3rd edition / 3.5 Dwarves. I don't recall there being any difference between the 2 editions, so I'm just going to do the 3.5 version. Now, this is supposed to be a more balanced or modular version of previous versions of the game, so it presented a lot of things differently. Now, all non-human characters in 3rd edition, they're going to start down 1 feat and 4 skill points compared to human characters. What it really is that human characters get an extra feat and the 4 skill points as a bonus, but we're saying that they're down compared to the human characters, and then they're going to receive 1 less skill point per level. Let's look and see if the extra stuff the dwarf gets overcome that. Your 3.5 dwarfs, they maintain the same age range from previous editions for the most part. Now they can live up to 450 instead of always living to 450, but the rest of the categories are pretty much the same. Their height averages are the same, but their actual height range is shrunk in now to 3'11" to 4'5". Dwarves get +2 to con and -2 to charisma. This is the strongest ability score racial modifiers available in core 3rd edition D&D because it gives a bonus to one of the strongest stats and a penalty to one of the weakest ones. Now, 3rd ed D&D did vastly increase the use of charisma. However, it's still one of the 2 least important scores of the game to the average character. Now, I personally think wisdom is the least important score, as it affects less skills, and the skills that it does affect are generally ones that has some other character in the party who has a ridiculously good score at it. You know, oh yeah, I've got an 8 wisdom. I rolled a 3 on my spot check. And then the ranger's like, I got a 37, and the druid says, I've got 42. So it's not that bad. Having a penalty to wisdom would give you a -1 penalty to will saves, but that's also not that bad. Now, dwarves now have a movement rate of 20 feet. They did before as well, or the equivalent of. I'm only just now mentioning movement speed because 3rd edition is almost always played with miniatures. However, dwarves are never slowed down due to armor or load, so most dwarven characters end up moving just as fast as their human counterparts. It's only the light or no armor ones that would seem to be slowed down compared to humans. Dwarves can still see in the dark. They still have bonuses to detect stonework features. You know, the thing that rarely or never comes up. Dwarves now get a +2 bonus on saves against poisons, spells, and spell-like effects. This isn't as good as the insanely good saves dwarves had in older versions, but it's still a great bump. Honestly, this would be a fair exchange for that 1 feat they lose. Dwarves also get a +2 to appraise and craft checks. Now, this is limited to items of stone or metal. However, what self-respecting dwarf would be appraising or crafting anything that wasn't stone or metal? I say this covers the skill point loss at level 1 entirely. Dwarves get some incredible combat bonuses. They treat the often used Dwarven War Axe and the never used Dwarven Urgosh as martial weapons rather than exotic. Well, basically what this means in play is that your Dwarven fighter with a shield has got this big 1d10 axe in one hand, while the human fighter, he has a shield and he has a 1d8 sword in his hand, so the dwarf is bringing more damage immediately. And he's hitting more often because he gets a +1 to hit orcs and goblinoids, and he's getting hit less often because he's got a +4 dodge bonus to armor class against monsters of the giant type. They finally got that right. They put the bonus on the armor class and not a penalty to the other thing. And the giant type is much expanded in 3rd edition. It contains many more monsters than the older versions did. With all the bonuses compared to humans, dwarves are strictly better than humans at every core class other than bard, paladin, or sorcerer. The difference is most pronounced with fighters, though, just because your human fighter and your dwarven fighter brings more damage, hits or has better defense, more in certain situations, and has more hit points. The dwarven wizard can also be a standout as the racial con bonus. That can be the make or break difference in a magic missile duel. Alright, what about 4th or 5th edition? I've got no idea. I sold my 4th edition books a month after they came out, and I never played 5th, so why don't you tell me about those versions down in the comments. Alright, I guess I'm done here. If you made it this far, why don't you hit that subscribe button. And remember, I'm always buying RPG material. I sell, and other tabletop gaming, I sell that stuff on eBay to make my living, so if you just want to ditch that collection of games you don't play anymore, get a hold of me on Instagram. Thanks, and I hope to see you again soon.